welcome everybody to the second of the Vinarchy in the UK webinars. And tonight I'm delighted to welcome, first off, Corinne Seeley and Kit Ellen. So Corinne Seeley and Kit Ellen from Exton Park Vineyard. So before I go on to a little more, also in this wonderful group this evening, we have Coralie Strong, who is an educator and all-round wine champion, somebody who has both a WSET diploma and is a Plumpton attendee and is pretty good when it comes to marketing and tasting wine too. So Coralie Strong from Every Glass Matters.
Yes.
And last but certainly not least, Michael Palij, who is a wonderful Canadian MW who is based in Oxford and runs the extremely, I think, credible and sommelier favorite wine traders, which he established at a relatively young age. So tonight also we are going to be talking about how wines from the UK might appeal to a young audience. And those I have tonight reflect that to some degree. It is all British-based panel tonight, although we do have a bit of an international flair. Corinne is from France, of course. Michael is, as I mentioned, from Canada. Well, you'll have to do with 3 Brits as well, who hopefully have done a little bit of travel time. So let's start off with Corinne. I should add that the wines this evening are brought to us by Exton Park. Thank you very much indeed, Kit and Corinne. And also that this Vinarchy in the UK, or Vinarchy, I suppose the world is your oyster in terms of how you pronounce that, is brought to you also by Zelda Molinar at My Wine Life, a fantastic website devoted and community devoted to wine from the Netherlands, and Kelvin Guest of Guest Wines Newcastle. I'm delighted to be waving the Geordie flag this evening. Corinne Seeley is an extremely respected winemaker, and we're delighted to have you with us on these shores. Corinne, you started your career at a relatively early age. You were 24 when you graduated, I think, from the Institute of Bordeaux in enology, at a time when it was a fairly male-dominated world. You have since gained a huge deal of experience at, for example, Domaine de Chevalier, well known for its whites and frankly for its reds too, which are very interesting, and some other top estates, both in Pauillac and in Australia and in the Douro, and then you found your way here to the UK, to Exton Park. Tell us about your journey. What made you want to come to the UK to bring all that experience here, and particularly to Hampshire?
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. Yes, welcome. Welcome to Exton Park Vineyard. Good question, David. If someone would have asked me many years ago, or would have told me that I would become a winemaker, and more than this, become a winemaker, a French winemaker, making wine in England, I think I would have just loved. Somehow it would have been a joke, and there I am. Yes, after having been what we call a flying winemaker, making wines around the world. Yes, just discovering regions and terroir, meeting people, and just sharing experiences. I met that special place here in England, Exton Park, and I'm sure you can fall in love with a lot of things, and I just fell in love with that vineyard. Actually, the location, it is based in Hampshire. It is in south of England. At the top of the estate, you can see the Isle of Wight. It is just beautiful. It is overviewing the Meon Valley. It is free. It is just free. It is a single vineyard of 24 hectares. So it's quite a big, spot now. One certainly of the largest vineyards in Hampshire. And it is based on a big slope. So we are at 120 meters above sea level at the top, and then at the bottom at 60 meters. We have been free to plant that vineyard. The first parcel was planted in 2003, but over 10 years, the last 10 years, we planted and doubled and just expanded the vineyard. It's done now. It's just a January, and you have to think that we do everything on site. So we have the vineyard. The winery was built just at the top of the vine, so it takes 5 minutes to bring the grapes in, and we can just play. I mean, I know that play it's a big word because it's behind a lot of work in the vineyard and in the winery, but you can really work closely together between vineyard and winery, and this is something very special. I think very unique. We are just unique.
It sounds wonderful. I must say that if we look at wines from Hampshire, what always amazes me by wines that I've tried from other estates there, and whether this is also to do with the winemaker, is the range of fruit and the range of options. So one gets at the same time Chardonnay with great finesse, at the same time wines that have been quite bold and complex. When I think of the various states around there, and when I look at your portfolio, we are talking in the UK at the moment about, when you look at the award winners from WineGB Awards in the past few years, Blanc de Blancs featured widely, and you do a great Blanc de Blanc, but you're also a champion of Pinot Meunier, of Pinot Noir, and it's that versatility and that of quality in Hampshire that for me really stands out.
Thank you for posing that subject and to bring that subject in. I really think that, yes, I know that Champagne, for example, could easily always be the obvious comparison to English sparkling wines, because we have got similarity in terms of geology, in terms of terroir. And in Hampshire, we have this chalk. At Exton Park, we just have that much of topsoil, and then it's pure chalk. It's very deep. And the vines are struggling to grow in. However, as a result, you've got this strength, this purity, this expression so strong. And yes, Chardonnay, for me, in England, Chardonnay could be the essence of the minerality. Then in terms of terroir, Pinot Meunier, we love Pinot Meunier here because Pinot Meunier is part, actually, in the rosé you are going to taste, you've got 30% of Pinot Meunier and 70% of Pinot Noir only. It's not a blend of red wine and white wine that you can have in Champagne or in a rosé. No, the rosé at Exton Park is only made with Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. And Pinot Meunier, yes, David, Pinot Meunier is a fantastic variety of grapes. It behaves like I like to say, like a naughty teenager. But when you educate it very in a good way, then he is a fantastic person to express the terroir. And at Exton Park, we try to minimize any intervention. I mean, we really want to the people to feel what we've got here in the vines, in the vineyard, in the terroir.
And let me bring Kit Ellen in here, who is also co-director and marketing manager at Exton. Kit, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about myself. I've been at Exton for about three and a half years now, which has been 3.5 of the most exciting years of my life. And I've always been in the wine trade since leaving university. I've known Michael here for about 10 years. In fact, I applied for my first ever job with Michael at Wine Traders. Previously to here, I was with a distributor working specifically with sparkling wines, mainly grower champagnes, for 3 or 4 years. And before that, a couple of different wine merchants, so always on the commercial side of business. But it is a particularly exciting time at the moment in our industry, which it is blossoming. But also at Exton Park, we're literally about to go through the most exciting evolution of our company and our offering. I am really enjoying my job at the moment, and I've got a lot to do.
And I'm sure you will be equal to the task. Michael, please tell us a bit about yourself, about your trajectory, how you've come to be director of this wonderful company, Wine Traders.
Sure. So Canadian, came to the UK in 1989. And for my sins, I studied English and philosophy at university. So it was impossible to get a job. So I started drinking as soon as I graduated. And when I was in the UK, I started working for Oddbins, which was really a proving ground, back in the day. I don't know if anybody remembers that, now 30 years ago. But it really was the hero of the high street back then. And so it was a great time. And, I was very fortunate to work with a branch manager who was incredibly passionate, had his diploma. And, every evening he would open, I don't know, something from Bordeaux or the Veneto, didn't really matter. And he'd sketch out on the wrapping paper, where it was from and who the producer was and what the grape varieties were. And we were all sitting there sort of transfixed by this sort of mini lesson that he was giving us. And so I started doing, the wine trade qualifications. Oddbins was great, for supporting that. It was really brilliant. And so many masters of wine today cut their teeth at Oddbins as I did. So I became a master of wine in 1995. I was 29. And by that point, I'd left Oddbins and become a buyer for a chain of shops and was dispatched to Italy and promptly fell in love with Italy and its wines. And I've specialized in Italian wines ever since. But, and this is the important but, when I was a feckless youth, I was traveling through Europe and ended up stopping in Champagne for about 6 months. And I worked for a small, very small producer, no longer there. And it was wonderful. And again, sort of slept on a straw mattress and, worked with his son and his vicious guard dog. And we'd go out and he was organic and biodynamic back in 1989 when nobody was. And Champagne's not a particularly favorable area for that anyway. So I've always had an affinity for sparkling wines. And when I discovered Corinne and Exton Park, the thing about Exton Park that really resonates with me is the vision, and we can talk about terroir and we can talk about winemaking, but ultimately there's a man or a woman behind that. And all of the terroir and all of the other components are always the paint and the paintbrushes, but you've got to have the artist there. I just love what Corinne does. It's wonderful stuff.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, Coralie, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Hi, I'm Coralie Strong, and I run Every Glass Matters. And obviously, I'm a slightly shorter time in the wine industry. I really got into wine when I started studying food science and nutrition at the University of Leeds and became the president of the Wine Society there. And what I really saw is there's a lot of young people who are desperate to find out more about this incredible world of wine that, we have all around us, so many fantastic countries, so many brilliant styles. But people are terrified to even ask questions or they don't know how to begin. So I think that's, what I'm really focused on is getting younger people or less knowledgeable people into drinking fantastic wines and saying, it's okay to be confused. We all are confused. There's nobody in this industry who's not saying, what region was that from? So after Leeds, I went to Plumpton College and did a master's, really to find out a lot more about the viticulture and enology side of things, how wine's made. And yeah, it was brilliant.
Superb. I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice saying that you spent less time than everybody else. I do know you, and I can assure everybody watching that that doesn't come across like that at all. So let's move into the tasting aspect straight away. We'll look at this wonderful Exton Park Rosé NV. So let's see if I can open this in a reasonably professional manner and get tasting.
I'm just asking Kate to pour me more wine. I think we deserve it tonight.
I'd say so.
We do. It is a Monday after all.
Absolutely. It's a lockdown Monday.
We need that, Coralie. Absolutely need it.
We do.
So,
we do.
There is something very important I would like to share with you tonight. As you can understand, I am absolutely French, and I'm very proud to be French. I succeeded to move to England just 2 months before the Brexit, so I've done very well indeed. But if there is something I'm convinced of, is that I'm not here in England to make a copy of champagne or to make a pale copy of champagne, because there is something different to make here, and there is something more interesting to make here. And I would say it's like creating a new style in a fashion. It's category of wine. And why? Because of the differences you can really think of. First, we are not in France, we are not in Champagne, and we are still in England. So look at this. Last week we had 37 degrees, and now I am having this. I'm happy to have this jacket on, and it's windy outside, and we have to deal with that all year long. It is the biggest challenge ever in my life. I like challenges, but this one is quite something, and I like it. But for that point, I couldn't be convinced. I couldn't believe that we can make a fantastic vintage every year in England. So I decided, and Coralie, you should help me to share this information, because I think it's very important that people, and when you drink a wine, to understand how it has been made.
Yeah.
And why it is so special. But on the other hand, I don't want to be too, what do you say, too technical? Technical, exactly. So how could you describe how we become too technical, and how is that how young people what would they like to know, and what is the limit to know about wine?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, for me, I think along with most young people, as long as we've got a glass of wine in front of us, then we're generally more receptive to information. I've had many a chats with people who've explained yeast strains and root stocks, and I'm thinking, yeah, but I want to know what the wine tastes like. So I think that's really important. And I think when you're talking to young people, or young people are learning about the wine, it's to really focus obviously on the key initial points: great variety, style, simple how it's made, but really look at what they're interested in. That, like, you know how wine is, the vineyard to the winery is completely different sides, and you'll have some people that are fascinated by how grapes grow, and other people who really want to know, how do you get alcohol in the wine? Because you've got to remember that everybody's starting with a completely different level of knowledge, and some people don't understand what rosé is, and some people do and love it. So I think, and so where wine's going at the moment, which is so fantastic, is communication is becoming really focused on the individual needs of the person consuming it, rather than 20, 30, 40 years ago, where there was a wine book and you had to read it if you wanted to learn more, and if you didn't, you didn't read it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that is why it is so important for us to have people like you, Coralie, and you, Michael, David. Obviously, we need at each step communication and a way to communicate well about the wine. As a winemaker, I would like to say just tonight that it took me many years to achieve that, and I think Exton Park Rosé is unique because the way it is made, and we've got the vineyard. It takes 5 minutes putting the old bunches into a press, and then I work for hours and hours until I get that color, and it could take 5-6 hours sometimes, make it completely bonkers because they're outside with a pile of bunches, grapes and they can't pick anymore. And I said, no, wait. So they have been very kind with me. They bought me a second press.
Oh.
Corinne, in that respect, tell us about this wine, because there are 2 or 3 ways of making sparkling rosé, and it's never easy to make it, fixing that color, prior to everything being settled and that secondary fermentation. It's an extended maceration. Is it for this particular rosé, or?
No, it's a mad French winemaker making wine in England. I'm the only person to do the rosé like I do.
Okay.
It's not a maceration. It's nothing else that you have met before, and it's just only because the way we work in the vineyard, so low yield, very low yield. We choose the parcel where we have the grapes picked for making the rosé, especially. So I work very closely with Fred Longdale, the fantastic vineyard manager. I would not be able to do anything without him and the team in the vineyard. So we choose the grapes, and then we dedicated everything to make sure that wine you have got here in your glass is made without intervention. I work under nitrogen to avoid oxidation. The first oxidation of the juices, I'm not against oxygen, but I want to preserve the freshness, the fruits, that saltiness you can taste almost in the wine. And I let Michael, I'd like him to really comment the wines, but then you have to think that that result is only possible because of the work in the vineyard. Yes. I'm certainly, I like to say that I am a talented winemaker, and thank you, but it's not only that. You have to have the fruits.
So talk more about how you actually press it then, because that's where it's really different. It's not saignée and it's not assemblage, it's a hybrid.
It's a secret.
We are just doing the pressing very slowly, very gently for long hours. And each time you need to, again, a technical point. When you press, there is a moment when everything is stuck in the press. You need to deflate the pressure. And normally, the empty space is filled up with the oxygen. In our case, it's a bag of nitrogen that very easily goes into the press to fill up that empty space. And it's the only way to lower the sulfur and to avoid oxidation, to keep the fruits inside the first juices that will be fermented later. And then it is it is a blend. It's like a big puzzle in your head. Each parcel of the vineyard is separated and kept in different vats, and then you blend it together to make that wine and to create a consistency over the years that people cannot make a difference. This one has been made with several different harvests, and you still have the color, you still have the taste, and it's like an art, actually. Yeah.
I would certainly agree wholeheartedly that it is an art. Michael, for me, this wine is, the technique here is creating something that has got a pinpoint freshness to it. Corinne mentioned that slight salinity. How is it for you?
Yeah, well, this was a wine that just blew me away. So when the first time I went to Exton Park, and I have been in quite a few wineries in my time, and and there were these sort of big bags hanging up, and I said, "Well, what's that for?" And Corinne said, "Oh, that's where I store the nitrogen." And even once she'd explained it to me, I couldn't understand it. It was really taught me through what you do with it, and so finally, I kind of understood the insane attention to detail that goes into just this one stage in the production of this wine, which is simply when you're deflating the bag in the pneumatic press, that you fill up the empty space with nitrogen, not oxygen. But this is attention to detail, and this is the stuff that is so easily lost. And I think what we have with English wine at the moment is this see, I didn't say the un-P word. We have a real opportunity here to get young people, to see the process, to visit wineries. I remember growing up in Canada, there's a tiny little slice of Ontario where we have some vineyards, and and it was great fun to go down there, as a kid. And once you do that, that wine becomes sort of part of your life because you remember those people behind it. And a picture's worth 1,000 words, and you can read as many books as you want, but if you've stood in the winery and seen that stuff happening, you won't understand it. And so I really think we have a great future for English wines, not just because of the inherent quality, but for the first time wines come home. Now in England, we can go to wineries, we can visit them, we can understand what they're doing, we can taste, we can meet the men and the women behind it, and really forge that relationship, which is so strong once you've met that person. And Coralie, you're right. Who knows what you might be interested in? You might be interested in the pruning cycle. You might be interested in the nitrogen. You might be interested in the bottling machine. Who knows? But everybody will be interested in something and take away that unique point that they really remember. And coming back to this wine, this method of production, which is unique to Exton Park, creates an incredibly finely poised, delicate kind of ballet style of rosé that's it's not covered with autolytic character. It's not covered with, masses of kind of over-extracted fruit or ripeness. It's just pinpoint, fresh, and this kind of little symphony of red fruit that every time you taste it, you go back to it and you go, I just went back to it now. I thought, it's like red currant or pomegranate or something. And the time before it was strawberries. And I've got a bowl of strawberries here, which I'm munching on because I really like them with this. And we don't have Wimbledon this year, so I reckon do the strawberries and the sparkling wine. And I just think it's a great celebration of what we can do in the UK with our own terroir. Where it's like Franciacorta in Italy or Cava in Spain. We're not trying to ape Champagne. We're creating something which is a real reflection of the terroir in all its senses, and of course the person behind it, in this case Corinne. So I'm a huge fan of this.
Absolutely. It's great that we've got something special here. I think that Exton Park, in a nutshell, already has a certain, I think, distinguished spirit about it, which is at the same time, I think, current, but also embodied a certain class when it comes to wines, and that's very much in this. Thinking of a pairing here, I did work briefly for Alan Murchison at Lauterland near Reading, and we're not a million miles away from there. He does a wonderful sweet corn panna cotta with crab cannelloni, and I feel that this is the kind of wine that would go particularly well with that dish. That slightly saline element, refreshing as well, slightly lifted sweetness in the fruit, but which is still very much pure fruit too. Very refreshing at the same time. You have your strawberries too. I'm glad that Kit is nodding in acceptance here. Funnily enough, I often use a rosé for dessert. One has to take care. And in a similar vein, I've done something similar with a vanilla panna cotta in the past with a hazelnut twirl and some fresh strawberries. I'd probably go for Scotch strawberries, but that's just my particular preference. And I think that would work wonderfully too. Something that, Corinne, I know that this is recommended with with shellfish, with chicken as well too, with light meats. you can really see that, how it's a great, not just aperitif, but serious starter wine as well, first course wine, and that wonderful English wispiness to it too, that pinpoint freshness that really speaks about the climate, the terroir.
Yeah, as you can imagine, I like to cook, I like to eat, I like to drink. This wine, the kind of, this one is quite savory, and the saltiness you can find, it's kind of just, you know, it's like you can feel the breeze of the sea. I don't know if it is the chalk. I don't know if it's because we are 10 minutes from, you know, from the ocean, but there is something iodine in it, and I recommend it, in my opinion, with smoke hot trots. This is just delicious. Or if you've got wild mushroom, a bit of asparagus, make a risotto. Use some rosé to make the sauce of the risotto, and add a little bit of bacon at the end, just a little bit. And yeah, I mean, if you could. And what I found fascinating, Kit and I, we do Oxford Wine Festival, Winchester Wine Festival, and a lot of young people, they now, I mean, we are not in the age, in the generation of the binge drinking. Now they like to cook, they like to enjoy the time, and they like to match and to pair good wines with good dish. And for me, it's a revelation. It's so great. I mean, this is the future for me.
Yeah.
So let's talk more deeply about that debate topic. How English wines, and Welsh wines, I should add, can appeal to a younger audience. You mentioned how young people, you know, they like to chop and choose to some extent. And there's a freshness in this wine that I think would appeal to younger people. I particularly picked the rosé tonight because I feel that without wanting to be, I suppose, cliche, rosé is a category that is growing very successfully, that younger people would drink. And I think the bottom line, the important point here is that rosé is accessible. Often when one is getting into wine, it can seem a bit of a hurdle, but rosé is something that often one drinks from an early age. There is fruit there, often in abundance. It has a color that is clearly fashionable as well. As celebrities, I can think of 2 or 3 rather famous wine estates based on rosé wine, and it has a certain appeal that one can relate to. Coralie, would you say that rosé is the young person's wine?
I'd say, I mean, yeah, there's definitely been some clear points there. I mean, the color, what's in fashion right now, these rather ghastly pale Provence-style rosés that have very little to them, but you know, arguably they are extremely fashionable, and they get a lot of people into exploring different wine regions, and even wines that they wouldn't have previously gone for before. I think rosé sparkling wine is, again, a great wine style that young people can relate to. Obviously, the trend of Prosecco has really brought a lot of people in, and the fact that they're now going to produce DOC rosé just shows how popular the style of rosé is. And I think it's a really important category for English wine. Obviously, in a lot of people's minds, English wine is sparkling wine dominated, although there are some fantastic still wines out there, I must just add. But yeah, I think I would never want to just say, oh, young people are into this, because I think that's just so untrue. There's young people who are into sherry, there's young people who are into every type. I'm a big Madeira girl, and that's really unfashionable. So I think it's really rosé. English rosé is definitely something that people can relate to, though, because it looks good in the glass. It's easy to put on social media. It's a celebration.
I think you're right. I think Corie, it's also this word of kind of accessibility. You know, rosé generally is seen as a very accessible wine. You look at it and you think about sunshine and relaxation and partying, and maybe it doesn't have some of those hangovers that red and white still, and even sparkling wines can have, with that kind of wine jargon that tends to come along with them.
Yeah, very true.
People are trying to get into wine, and actually rosé is a great place to start, because it's not to say that it's not complex. It is complex. A lot of them aren't, but it's certainly seen as more accessible, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you when do you crack open a rosé? When it's bright sunshine, you're with your friends. It just goes with that whole idea of I'm having fun.
Absolutely.
Do you think that, Oz Clarke was talking last week about how people should be drinking English rosé, that it's fashionable, but I also feel that when one looks at the potential for the growth in our industry over the next 12 years, we're looking at potentially an 8-fold growth. And I think rosé can be a big part of that. I think we have an opportunity now to position sparkling English rosé in the market that is, I think, in a higher price bracket, but still affordable, still cheaper than champagne, and an opportunity to sell this is something that could be globally very interesting.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think it taps into this wider trend for rosé generally at the moment, but also dry, still, more complex, more interesting rosés rather than mass-produced sweet rosés. That's certainly helping us. And so it's almost like a gateway style of wine into more complex styles. I definitely think the rosé, I mean, here at Exton Park, you know, the Pinot Meunier rosés that Corinne is producing, and this has, as she mentioned, 30% in Pinot Meunier rosé, is a thing of beauty, and it's something completely apart from anything else that other people produce. And Corinne often refers to Pinot Meunier, as she did earlier, as one of these grape varieties that could be the future of England. It's something that's often overlooked in Champagne as more of a bulking grape or a mass-produced grape, and it's also, you know, it's also fairly difficult to grow. So I think rosé is a particularly exciting area for English wine. I think one of the things that we've got to be very careful of, and this we'll probably talk a little bit more about later, is the amount of wine coming on stream in the UK over the next coming years. And there is a huge drive at the moment to export and to sort of stave off any kind of oversupply that there might be on domestic shores. And you know, in doing that, the key to doing that is to have these hero wines that people can kind of attach to, in the same way that Provençal rosé has done it for Provence, you know. And so if English rosé becomes one of those wines of sort of like, this is a flagship wine of England, and it helps us to drive these exports, and that's a brilliant thing.
And I'd just like to quickly add on the whole rosé thing. We've talked for the last few minutes about how accessible, about how it's easy to get into, but actually what a lot of people miss, and as this wine clearly shows, it can be incredibly complex, incredibly interesting, a really high quality top wine. You know, this is one of my favorite English sparkling wines, full stop. So it just shows the quality in the glass. And you know, a lot of people that are getting into rosé don't forget that you can keep exploring rosé rather than moving on to a white or red, which is often thought of to be more complex.
Yeah, I would have to say that there is no doubt that English rosé is also complex. Pinot Meunier, we only have to look at the fact that Krug used Pinot Meunier quite readily, for example, and that just goes to show how interesting it is, perhaps in France, but very much so in England too. This could be part of our identity going forward. Michael, I want to ask, you were one of the youngest people, I should add, to qualify as Master of Wine. Did you feel that when you were taking your qualifications, was it easy to get into this arena as a young person?
Sort of as a white, male, privileged, university educated individual, there were no hurdles at all. Yeah, I just, circling back to what you were talking about earlier with the rosés, I just sound a note of caution as somebody who has lived and worked through many, many trends. I don't know if you remember Soave or Valpolicella or Chianti and Raffia covered bottles, or Pinot Grigio or Gavi. or Australian Chardonnay. You know, these have all been trends, and Prosecco, whilst it's very much on the money at the moment, will soon be a tattered weed of small worth held. And we need to remember that the people who are making good Australian Chardonnay or good Chianti or good Soave, indeed good Prosecco, those estates were there 20 years ago, they're there today, and they will be there 20 years hence. And I think our role in the industry is to take young people and really whatever it is that is the hook which gets them into our industry. So today it's probably Rosé or Prosecco or whatever it is, to make sure that we take them on a brand journey. And by a brand, I mean wine. And wine is incredibly fragmented. And the success of large companies like Gallo in the States is that what they've done is they've treated wine to an extent like a commodity and said that you can come in here at the entry level at £5 and you can go out there at 50 quid and you can stay with Gallo, the name you know and you trust, for that entire journey. And if you think about so many other brands, and Bordeaux is a great example, or Burgundy, doesn't really matter, but Domaine de la Romanée-Conti or Latour or Lafite or whatever it is, you know, those producers don't really have an entry-level product as hard as they try. And so it's very, very difficult for consumers to navigate the world of wine, which is why overall so many countries are now looking to Asia for growth, because what we're not doing in the UK statistically is attracting more young people into wine, and wine, which has been on a roll for the last 30 years, is now in decline overall. And that's because people, the young people, are saying, well, you know, wine was what my parents drank and I don't really want to drink that. And it's pretty bloody complicated, let's be honest, to try to get into wine. And so, you know, there are lots of other options. There's lots of other producers of ethanol who are out there competing for that wallet share. And I think what we're missing is to make wine accessible for people. And that's why all the critter brands from Australia have been so successful, because people see a cute little picture of a kangaroo or whatever it is and they go, well, you know what, it's probably going to taste consistent with all the other critter brands that I've tasted, and therefore I'm going to try it. And so in Europe, where we've got much more complex nomenclature and legislations protecting words, we need to take those young consumers on a journey. And increasingly now, where social media is so accessible, there's an opportunity to create those kind of stories with which people can identify, whatever that might be. But we can create those brands within wine and tell those stories, and people will identify with those. So champagne's a great example, but if you think about the largest champagne brands, they are all owned by Pernod Ricard or LVMH or whoever it might be. Those are hardly warm, small, fuzzy producers, you know, with which you can have a feeling of some kind of camaraderie, who are speaking to you about that journey that they're on, as Corinne can do. So that's our opportunity, is to take young people and say, look, you know, here's a brand you can really believe in, and here are the reasons why.
Sure. Ken and Corinne, do you feel that in England we need to be bottling wines with labels with critters on them, or is there a message about English wine that will appeal to both younger people and those who are more senior? When I think of the image of English wine, I think of something that has a freshness about it, a buoyancy. I think of English summer gardens. I think that branding can work both ways. I think the forte of English wine is very much that it is both youthful in some respects. You know, we're not trying to be champagne and that'll steer way to prestige, but at the same time is classic. Is it about combining the two for you?
It's an interesting one. I think it's a fine balance to try and hit, because the natural comparison, like it or not, is champagne. And a lot of English producers, you know, in terms of their entire approach, let alone just branding, 20, 30 years ago, the pioneers of English sparkling wine had to make a champagne. They had to make as much of a champagne style wine as they could in order to convince the industry that they were relevant and worth listening to. And I think now you've got this. What's so exciting is that the industry is now matured, or is maturing, and you've got producers like Exton Park who are coming up and saying, well, actually, no, you know, we're not champagne. We want to establish ourselves as something different. And that, you know, if you want to buy champagne, there's always going to be an area of the market for champagne. But actually, English sparkling wine has its own idiosyncrasies and its own uniqueness. And so I think in terms of branding, a lot of English producers went down this road of sort of saying, we need to make sure that consumers understand the style of wine we're trying to produce here, which is a champagne copy to a certain degree. I think now people are sort of saying, okay, if English wine is different, and if English wine does have its own uniqueness, then the very first thing that a consumer sees is the imagery. And we need to make sure that it looks distinctive too, and it doesn't just look like a champagne. And it's really topical for us because we're going through this process as we speak, because we're completely rebranding and reviewing our entire imagery for the autumn this year. And so we've gone through this incredible 6-month process, going deep into our kind of DNA of everything that we do here at Exton Park. You know, the fact that we're a single estate producer, we grow all of our own fruit right there in that 60-acre vineyard. We make all the wine here. Well, Corinne makes all the wine here in that winery, and it's all done in this one place. And we're trying to capture all of that and make sure that we're really communicating that very quickly and very impactfully and very effectively in our branding. One of the things that I've always believed in, and I don't have anywhere near as much experience as some of the people around the table here, but one of the things I've always believed in is that in terms of designing a wine label, it should do one of two things, and hopefully both. One is that if it's on a shelf, it should either make a consumer want to buy it straight away, or if it's up, turn it around and read more. And this is kind of one of the principles that we're really looking at, and that we want to, hopefully, we'll find out in the autumn when we release this, hopefully we've caught both sides of that. But I think, yeah, I think it's really exciting times, but I think a lot of producers now are coming through with this very simple, very stripped back, very impactful looking branding and wine labels.
I mean, having done a little research, I think the labels do matter. Michael's right to say that labeling has to be, it has to be a thought, and it has to be a serious thought. And different labels appeal to different people. I think we've tried very hard in England to create labeling that is not champagne, that is distinct, that is fresher. One only has to look at, should I draw parallels with the likes of Palij, who have bottled a little bit of English wine here. There's a complete difference in the labeling. That there's a vibrancy and a freshness and perhaps a understated, perhaps quintessentially English look about many bottles that I think can very much appeal. So the World Economic Forum has done a bit of study on this subject, and they've come up with the fact that the number one issue for young people is climate change, but also combating climate change in an entrepreneurial fashion, having the means as a young person to get on the ladder and make your voice heard. Corinne, tell me a little bit about the way that you work in terms of the vineyard. Is sustainability important to your vines and to your wine?
It always has been. I am a person very keen on preserving things and not to intervene as much as I can. We have to understand that we are in England, so this weather conducts us, and it's very difficult to be. We couldn't be just 100% without spraying, for example. We need to pay people at the end. However, talking about the young people and actually even older people, we do not like now high level of alcohol. Here at Exton Park, we work in a way that I don't like to add sugar. And so you can see on the back label that the level of alcohol is only around 11%, which is very, very low. And I think young people like it because, yes, we are in that new generation that now are really concerned about alcoholism and about driving. And it's very important for everybody to balance everything, to have the pleasure to drink something good, but also not to be sick or to be arrested. So anyway, it's for me, it is important. And so, and it enables me to respect the fruits again and the balance between the sugar and the acidity. So everything is made, yes, I like Michael for having told that, is with detail, precision.
I think it's a really interesting question, the one about sustainability, because there are organic producers in the UK. They do exist, and some of them make some really fantastic wine. But it's not easy, in this climate. If you get a year like 2017, when we had this incredible, horrific air frost that just swept across the country in late April, early May. People who are organic, who already have tiny yields anyway, that year were just wiped out completely. And so I think the commercial reality of sustainability in the UK is it works both ways. On the one side, there are certain things that you have to use in a vineyard in order to make it commercially viable. But on the other side of things, we understand here, and Fred in the vineyard understands completely, that if you've got healthy soil, you're going to have healthy vines. If you have healthy vines, you get great fruit. You've got great fruit, you make great wine. And he's kind of out there. He's out there with sort of a microscope, counting how many worms he counts in the soil, and doing all these incredible cover crops, in order to kind of control the weeds and bring nutrients into the soil. Cover crops everywhere. So there are certain things that we can certainly do in terms of sustainability here. I don't think Exton Park will ever be 100% organic, certainly not in the near future. But in terms of sustainability, we're kind of covered in solar panels everywhere here. Where there aren't vines, there are wildflower meadows. And where there are vines, there's all sorts of really cool experiments happening in the vineyard to create little ecosystems and microclimates.
Sure. I think Nick said last week that one tries to be as sustainable as possible, but just getting that organic stamp is not the be-all and end-all. It's a balance with a holistic model, and I think that's very much what you have there. So, Michael, would you think, so looking at sustainability, in our last webinar, we're going to go into this a little bit, different formats. For younger people, I think cans especially are a format that could become quite interesting. Any plans to take on any cans or different formats as a trader?
No, not at the moment. We'll keep an open mind on it. I think with the impact of everything needs to be evaluated across the whole production chain. So, for example, cans are made of aluminium, and although it recycles, the energy cost of creating aluminium is insane. So, for example, everybody's into screw caps, but actually, from a sustainability perspective, screw caps use 19 times more energy to produce than a cork. And that's before you count the possibility to recycle. Just because aluminium, I don't know if you know how aluminium is made, but the refining process involves electricity, and you need to send enough voltage through it so that the aluminium collects on a sort of giant electrode that's about 1.5 meters long in a big sort of tank of slurry, and then they take the aluminium off the electrode, and so that's incredibly energy intensive. So it's easy to think, cans are great, they're smaller, they're lighter, whatever. But the real win here is about transporting in bulk. So if you think about, we do make wine in the UK, but statistically a tiny percentage of what we consume. But the largest country of export to the UK is Australia. So the win here, it's not about screw caps, it's not about corks, it's about shipping in flexi. So a flexi is like a shipping container, but with a big sort of bladder inside it that holds 25,000 liters, and you ship that to the UK and then bottle it here, and that will do more to reduce your environmental impact around wine than anything else. But I would also hasten to add, as individuals, I think you need to think globally but act locally. So the biggest thing the whole planet can do to stop global warming is to stop eating meat. It's pretty simple. So we can fettle around the edges, but I wonder sometimes whether the people who buy cans thinking that it's environmentally friendly have actually done the research on the energy inputs throughout that whole production chain, or they're just like, oh, this is really cool, it's a can, I think I should try it. And along the way, I'm picking up some environmental kudos.
Sure. Yes, I suppose one has to look a little deeper, and you're right in saying that transportation is the main issue. But I think all packaging probably has its pros and cons. One looks at bauxite, looks at this potentially, I think off-putting slurry that's involved. Maybe I should think twice about my next can. Coralie, your customers in Every Glass Matters, are they talking about these different formats? Is that aspect of sustainability interesting for them?
Yeah, there's been, I've done a lot of work with bagging wines and wines in cans. And yeah, I think it's definitely an important argument to make. I think there still needs to be a lot more information on it. But actually what I was going to say, going back to bottles, is this is one of the huge areas where I think English wine can really connect with the younger consumer, is actually saying there has been no transport to get this wine to you. The vineyard is there. You live in Hampshire, it's come from 5-10 miles away. You can walk and get your wine. This is something that I think really is something in the UK that we need to push, is the fact that we can drink locally. People should, as you said, Michael, about stopping eating meat, or even eating local meat, eating local eggs, eating local vegetables. There's a huge push on this, and it's a trend that's only going to increase. So why can't we extend that to drinking local wine? We already drink local beer, local gin. So,
and I think it's even bigger than that, isn't it? Because the trend is now going, in haute cuisine, you're seeing hyper local, things like, we work very close to the Simon Rogan and his restaurants, and they are really kind of clued up on this, and so are their customers. But equally, in everything that we're eating and drinking, consumers kind of are getting far more interested in provenance and traceability. Where has this come from? How was it made? Where was it made? What was the process that it went through? And I think you're absolutely right, Coralie. This is an area that we can tap into and are tapping into in the English wine trade.
Well, I see it at both, my background obviously in food science, nutrition, and the number of people who, it doesn't matter that I have a degree in it, they'll still tell me they're wrong, because that I'm wrong is because they're so interested in it. People, food and drink, particularly what they're putting in their bodies, people have just in the last kind of five years gone, we really want to focus on this. Everybody has their own opinion on what diets work, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. But overall, the local approach is the one that seems to be, everybody seems to kind of be in agreement with that one, which for the food and wine industry is saying something if a lot of people agree.
I think you've both raised, I think, what is a key strong point for English wine, and that's the on-trade sector, which at the moment could be a little better, obviously, but I feel that, Jess mentioned this last week, that the on-trade is very important in terms of setting a fashion, and a fashion that isn't just based on fashion, but today is based on holistic principles, much as we've been discussing. That's key for you, Kit, is it? Not just from a marketing angle, but to be involved in that holistic process with Simon Rogan, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Simon Rogan's a great example for us, because the relationship is, it took us probably 2 years to get off the ground, and it's been sort of slow burn. And now we're kind of in there really closely working with them, and we know the team all really well. Their managing director, who's also now a partner with Simon Rogan, Sam Ward, he's 34, and he's probably the most dynamic, proactive, energetic person I've met in the hospitality industry. And these guys really care. They've got 3 restaurants in one village up in the Lake Districts, and almost all of their food comes from a farm in the same village where they're growing everything themselves. And they're getting wine from, maybe the wine in the Lake District wouldn't work so well, so they're getting wine from a Hampshire producer. But it's actually kind of a sustainable relationship. We've been working with them took about 2 years off the ground. We've been working for them for about a year and a half now. And we've gone out of our way to do things for them, and they've gone out of their way to do things for us. And throughout a period like we've gone through in the last 3.5 months, where it's been awful for the hospitality industry and for their suppliers, this has been one of those times where people really kind of know who their friends are. When people have stuck in there and have sort of said, listen, we've sort of said to their, they're probably our biggest customer in terms of their whole site. And we've said to them, okay, we can ease up a little bit on invoice payments for a little bit, because we know that this is going to be an awful time for you guys, which they've really appreciated. And likewise, coming out of this in their resurgence, and on their first day of opening up bookings, they had 1,000 bookings on their first day. In their resurgence, they're saying to us, because you've stuck by us, we'll stick by you. So sustainability works in many different ways. The sustainability of where your produce has come from, where your wine has come from. There's a sustainability of relationships and making sure that you're both giving taking both ways. But there's also sustainability of business. You know, there's the best kind of, one of the best kinds of sustainability is a sustainable business, and theirs is, and hopefully ours is too.
I would agree. Corinne, do you feel that you have experience from a young age in Bordeaux when at the time things were tricky, perhaps male orientated? By rights, wineries today and vineyards employ a lot of younger people. Do you think things move on, I must say, but do you feel that in England today, there are good opportunities for younger people? Do you think that it's a creative and entrepreneurial industry?
Definitely. I encourage everyone to, I think I have certainly one of the best jobs in the world. You have to think that you have to be brave. It's still, I'm not talking anymore about men or women, especially in England. England, I said, is free. It's a big job. It's you know, you have to roll up your sleeves. And but yes, please, it has so much opportunities in front of you, and because the future is there, and we are making something different. We are at the time of creating a new identity, a new personality, a new something, and young people should be part of that. And this is really special. So yes.
Sure. We have Plumpton College, of course, which is in its relative infancy, although a key bastion of learning throughout Western Europe now. Coralie, you are at Plumpton at the moment. Do you find this is an accessible route? How advantageous is it having that here in England?
Yeah, well, I'm no longer at Plumpton, but yeah, I've luckily finished being a student for the time being. Right. But yeah, no, it's so critical. I mean, the people that Plumpton teach and support become some of the top winemakers in the UK. It's actually not that new, and the wine course has been there for over 2 decades, but they've really expanded in recent times to offer a lot more programs, including business, masters, foundation courses, you name it, they kind of really teach it. And it's so important that if you look at a lot of really top wine countries, they all have top wine universities. And we've really got to, I think, in order to grow as an industry, if you can put a university on the map, then that's critical. And they're doing a great job there.
Sure, I couldn't agree more. I would be very interested in going to Plumpton at some stage, Coralie. You'll have to tell me all about that. Michael, you were saying earlier on that it was relatively easy for you at a young age to get to where you want to get to. Although, let's be honest, I think the Master of Wine is probably, if not, one of the hardest exams in the world. From a sommelier angle, I do feel that we have, for example, we have plenty of role models. They do tend to be white and male. One looks at Dylan Proctor, for example, from the Song movie in the US. I feel to be more inclusive and to be more appealing to younger people, we need to be proactive in the UK. There are plenty of young people in the hospitality industry, but how many of them from diverse backgrounds are making the step to being a sommelier? Do you feel that we need to perhaps be a little more proactive here in the UK?
We need to be a lot more proactive in the UK, and I think that needs to take various different strands. It needs to affect every aspect of what we do, and we need to start with getting our own house in order by examining our own attitudes towards visible minorities, and how if you're in an on-trade situation, how are visible minorities treated, either as customers or as members of staff, and do we afford equal opportunities to those people as we do to white males? Are we looking after making sure that our own industry is diverse? And I cannot think of an industry which is more you know, male Anglo-Saxon in the wine trade. I mean, it's a parody. I mean, you know, even at the tastings, you go to these tastings and you just know you're going to find absolutely everybody has got a cut glass public school accent. They're wearing red corduroy trousers, and you know, and they all have trust funds. I mean, it is just, you know, an absolute like amen in the church. That is our industry, and we have so far to go before we even address basic issues like gender equality, you know, let alone including visible minorities into our industry. And we have to change first. It's a, you know, it's not enough to offer a scholarship, or it's our attitudes. You know, how do we, I don't know, you know, because we all do it all the time, you know, we kind of lose track of what this really feels like. But do you know what? Going into a Michelin 2-star establishment is pretty intimidating if you grew up on a council estate.
Yes, I think probably at a crossroads in the UK to some extent, in that from a cuisine aspect, we've dragged ourselves up from the by the bootlaces, from being the back of nowhere to having perhaps the best restaurant scene in the world in London, and the wines to go with it, and the quality in England now. But from a personnel point of view, I think we probably have quite a bit to do too at the same time. And I think that's plain in what you've said and what we've discussed just now. I'm conscious that the time is, well, we've done an hour already. Can you believe that? Time flies when one is having excellent debate about English wine. Let's have another go at Exton Park's Rosé here. I wonder if it's developed a little bit.
Merci.
For me, this is a wine that does drink well straight out the bottle, Kit, and is drinking well now as well. So it may be a bit of an unfair challenge to see if it's developed. It was beautiful when I opened it, and it still is now.
Yes, absolutely. Our whites are really interesting. I think I was saying to you before the start of the rosé, you can just open straight away. It doesn't need much oxygen to get it to open it up, but it does develop as it goes. The whites, particularly, I find, do develop a lot more as they get more oxygen into them. And one of the amazing things here is, if you think about the way that Corinne's earlier described how she makes this wine, this is basically the first time that it's got oxygen. You know, the grapes have come straight from the vineyard, which is right there, into the winery, and they've been pressed under nitrogen gas and then kept in stainless steel tanks until they're bottled. And it's not until the cork is taken out there, really, that you get any oxygen to the wine. So I find with the whites particularly, that they, as they open up, they do sort of change and broaden out a little bit. The rosé, I think, is just such a stunning wine. This is easily our best-selling wine, which is pretty unusual for a sparkling wine producer. Normally, it would be their sort of their Brut Reserve or classic cuvée. But the rosé, I think, this specifically unusual style where you've got that fruit in there, but you've got some very unusual kind of savoury aspects going on, and then this kind of floral hit at the end. There's almost like a kind of slight rose petal finish to it, along with that saline, salty flavour. You've got that kind of slightly bitter cranberry, which is this kind of almost like a crunchiness. There's a lot going on in the wine, and I think it's very complex.
I would hardly agree. Coralie, you look you're engrossed.
Yeah, it's such an interesting wine. It keeps on giving.
And I think going back to the Meunier, the floral element in this wine, particularly when it's young, we believe comes from that Meunier, that 30% of Meunier in there. The way that Corinne makes it, and on lower yields on chalk, produces a particularly floral wine for us.
I should mention, Corinne, I don't know if we mentioned that you have the 100% Meunier as well. We've discussed that this is a grape that has a future in the UK. Is it just the chalk soils? Is it your hand as winemaker? Is it this particularly special way in which you are pressing? What is it for you that makes Meunier so special in Hampshire?
Well, I think all of it's all the bits you are talking about. Above all, it's the will to make surprises. So for me, a birthday is every day, and I like to surprise my team and the people. I've got surprises coming, and yeah, I think life is too short to just, life has to be enjoyable and to be enjoyed. And yeah, the sparkling wines certainly in England make people cheerful. I like to say that when I get bored in a board meeting, I like to open one of my bottles and they understand. We change the subject.
I think if that isn't what I would be looking for as a younger person, I don't know what is. You know, there's a viveness about this wine. There's you know, a vibrancy about it that speaks of youthfulness, but in great quality too. This is a serious wine too. So I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. I think wines are made to make people, you know, honor their life, and in summertimes it's a great thing to pour with a barbecue, and in the winter just enjoying in front of the fireplace. So yes, a wine dedicated to just please people, and above all also share with your friends. It's very important. We all know that friends are very important at the moment. So yes, please.
Especially in these times. So I think I should probably draw an end to the proceedings. I want to thank you all foremost for attending this. So Corinne and Kit, thank you very much. Michael, thank you very much indeed. And thank you enormously as well, Coralie, for being part of this debate. I don't know if we've righted any wrongs when it comes to where UK wines might go in terms of appealing to younger people, but hopefully we've added to the debate. For those of you who are watching, thank you very much indeed. Splendid that you were joining us on this slightly damp English evening. Fresh is the word, though. Next week, of course, we are debating Cool Britannia, the identity of brand UK in the global context, with some wonderful attendees from around the world. And that's with Zelda Molinar, who retakes the reins from me for that webinar. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to my panelists this evening, and good night.
Cheers.
Bye.
Good night. Santé. Okay.